Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more, I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he didn't ask about the actual amount, and I didn't want to be braggy about it, especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place, and in the process of having to submit our pay stubs, it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English Lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister, but it was for non-profit work making $22K /year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity /equity / inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. Especially since I grew up blue-collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen, and we haven't really talked since yesterday. I am 33 female, don't think I'm in the wrong here, but the way my neighbors reacted to me has me second-guessing myself. A few days ago I woke up at 8:30 a.m. and was about to let my large dogs out into my fenced backyard. At the last second I checked my phone and saw that my next-door neighbor Catherine had sent me a text at 1 a.m. telling me there would be contractors in my backyard power washing her house from 8 to 9 a.m. Here's my issue. I wouldn't mind letting them in my yard if that made the work easier. But Catherine never asked, she just told me it was happening, with 7 hours notice, in a text sent to me while I was asleep. It was just by chance that I saw it before I let the dogs outside, and had I not seen it, I could have let my dogs out into my yard with contractors already in the yard. One of my dogs is a very fearful dog, and while he has never bitten anyone, that is only because I work extremely hard to protect him from unwanted encounters with strangers, advocate for him and his personal space and special needs, and never let anyone get close to him without measures taken to make sure everyone is safe. He is a very loving and special dog, so this is just not a risk I'm willing to take because I want to be a responsible dog owner. My neighbors know this, and they know he's scared of pretty much any person that I don't carefully introduce him to. I also have very clear signage on all the gates. But they told the contractors they could go into my yard. Didn't ask permission, didn't wait for my answer. I felt this was an egregious overstep, and just kinda rude and entitled of them to not ask me permission, and just tell me it was happening like I had no say in the matter. I got mad and texted her back and told her that this could have a very serious safety issue and it is not okay, under any circumstances, for them to ever give anyone permission to enter my yard where my dogs could bite them. Unacceptable, and never again. Catherine's husband Jack then blew his top and told me that they didn't have any notice either. They heard from the contractor in the middle of the night and there was no time to notify me. I feel like that's not my problem, and that they should have waited to receive confirmed permission from me before telling the contractors it was okay. I really don't think I'm asking a lot here. I feel like this is an extremely reasonable request, dog issues or not. Then Jack told me that my behavior was unacceptable and that any harassment of the contractors would be dealt with, and that I was to immediately cease harassing Catherine. I never even spoke to the contractors. And I sent Catherine a total of 4 text messages that more or less said that this is a boundary they can't cross. This was unacceptable, and they are not to do it again. Jack sent me a few more nasty texts, and at this point I'm not really interested in being friendly anymore. But Jack still said that I was the one who was being unacceptable. Jack just yelled at me from his balcony to tell me that the painters will be coming back multiple times this week and he doesn't know when, so I am calling the company first thing tomorrow and explaining the situation to them. I am installing gate locks this afternoon. I'm 19 years old female was traveling alone on an 11-hour flight today. And a guy in his 20-year is in the same row as me. I was exhausted because I only got 4 hours of sleep before the flight so I could sleep on the plane, but this guy, we'll call him C, keeps trying to make conversation. C starts off by telling me he's autistic, and then asking me if I like K-pop, and he keeps non-stop talking and rarely gives me a chance to speak, not that I wanted to. I tried to be polite because I have ADHD and I understand how social cues are difficult, so he probably can't tell I'm not in the mood. Over the course of the next 20 minutes I tell C maybe 5 times I want to sleep and put my headphones on, and each time, C begins speaking to me after maybe 2 minutes of silence. Finally, I was able to sleep for around 4 hours, but when I woke up C started up again. I'm still really tired, and I had some personal issues the day before my flight, so I'm also socially exhausted. But I let him talk for a bit before I start watching a show on my phone. I tell him maybe 5 separate times that I'm trying to watch a show, and that I'm not interested in talking to him right now, but maybe later. C still keeps trying to talk to me, and when I snap a bit and tell him I'm getting a bit annoyed, he goes into a full-on self-hating, "I'm so sorry, I'm horrible, God, I'm just gonna shut up now," rant. And I feel bad because I should have been nicer to him, and I can understand emotions being too strong and spiraling. I tell C that it's okay, and I just want some time to myself as I'm not the chattiest person, but maybe later we can talk. I put my headphones on and watched my show, but C kept trying to speak to me, but this time I ignored him. Which was honestly a shitty move from me, but I just didn't have the energy at this point to interact with him. This was the wrong move, as he moved to get out of the row and stood in the aisle and began yelling at me. I didn't catch everything he said, but it was along the lines of, "Why can't women believe not all men are bad? Some men are on your side. I'm a nice guy, why are you ignoring me?" He storms off to the bathroom, and I take that chance to ask a flight attendant if I can change my seat because he really freaked me out, and I didn't want to have a panic attack on a plane. The flight attendants were amazing and got my stuff and moved me far away from him. I feel like I'm TA because he does have autism, and I could have been more patient maybe, and ignoring him was a shit thing to do. My husband Derek and I have been married for 3 years, together for 7 total. Several years ago, about 6 now, I guess, I worked closely with a male coworker, Paul, that Derek was never fond of. Paul and I never had an inappropriate relationship. Derek's jealousy wasn't completely out of nowhere. I get why he felt that way. Those couple years were a perfect storm of relationship stress. I was working long hours. We were living apart after trying and failing to move in together. Our relationship was still fairly new. And then you add in a handsome coworker I had to spend long hours with and saw more than my boyfriend at the time. Paul was the source of several fights. Again, we never did anything that wasn't completely kosher. Eventually I told Derek he needed to trust me and get over it, or we were going to have to break up. He said he would stop worrying, and for the most part things were good. When Paul transferred out of state a few months later, things were really good. There were no worries at all, and our relationship has been amazingly strong ever since. This last weekend, my husband went out with a couple friends to some bars and a football game. When he came home, he was pretty wasted. We talked for a bit, and he mentioned how a friend of his had told him that he broke up with his girlfriend because she cheated on him. I commented on how that was a bummer and good for him for finding out before they got too serious. Derek, however, had a different take on it. He said it was a shame because they had seemed like a good couple, and if they really loved each other his friend could move past the cheating. Just like he had with me. At first I thought my husband was admitting to cheating on me, and asked him what he meant. He told me he always knew that Paul and I had slept together at least once all those years ago. But he knew I was the one for him and forgave me. I told Derek that I had never so much as even hugged Paul, except maybe at his going away party, let alone slept with him. Derek sort of just patted me on the arm, said of course, and passed out. The next morning I asked him about the conversation and he said it was okay, he had forgiven me, it wasn't even an issue. I again stressed that I had never cheated on him with anybody and I needed him to believe me. He sort of did the same, of course you didn't, babe wink thing again, and went to work. Every time I've tried to talk to him since, he won't hear me out. I'm this close to losing it with him. I need him to know that I never cheated, and I'm hurt that he thinks I would do something like that. What do I do? Do I just let him have this since it's not really hurting anything, or what? I don't want my own husband to think so little of me that he thinks I would cheat. That's not who I am.